Thank you very much indeed, Clive, and I hereby open with our bell. And I welcome everybody. We have a lot of visitors with us today, and I will hopefully invite various members to welcome some of our guests. But a general welcome to everybody, particularly our old friends who we have been seeing quite regularly on Zoom, and our new friends who I will now proceed to identify. Can I start by asking Nikki Stone if she would care to introduce some individuals that she has invited?
President Harry Belloc, Rotary Club of Radlett, and he's brought 12 or 15 members with him.
Thank you very much indeed, Harry, for attending our meeting today with such a great entourage. I'm sure you'll find the talk later interesting, and hopefully that you'll have questions that our speaker has difficulty in answering. Those are always the best sort.
Thank you very much for
thank you for that. I'd now like to invite Hugh Kirk to welcome two other particular guests or groups of guests. Hugh, would you like to invite your guests?
Right, today I would like to invite a very special guest, and it's my pleasure introducing Gerald Arnold. His grandfather was one of the 17 founding members of the Rotary Club of London, and he was also the third president of this club in the year 1913-14. And his grandfather was also president of what was then known as the British Association of Rotary Clubs, commonly known as BARC, now of course RIBI. And I'm sure President David and members, you're warmly welcome the grandson of our third president of this club, Gerald Arnold.
Hugh, I would welcome him with great pleasure. And the Rotary Club of Torquay was the first club to initiate an international conference.
Pleased to be with you this afternoon, and I pass on my good wishes from President Graham Dodson of the Torquay Club, where we'll be going through the chair again after him next year for the second time. Thank you very much indeed for your invitation, President.
Thank you very much indeed. I was going to say that here we have, I don't know whether you can see it, I'm just going to try to get it on my own screen, which I've now lost. A memento from 1924, which was the year in which the first international conference was held in Torquay. And this is amongst our treasures, is a piece of Torquay pottery given or provided to members on that event. So this is a connection with yourselves in Torquay. Thank you.
And David, 2,000 members attended that conference, which is quite remarkable.
Indeed. Indeed, it's almost incredible to think within 14 or 15 years of us being formed, in the UK, we had 2,000 members attending a conference. Yes. Hugh, you have another guest to invite.
Yes, and he is the current president of the Rotary Club of Colombo. And it's been my pleasure in recent years also to have visited the Rotary Club of Colombo. He is Mr. Muro Gisho, yes, and we give him a very welcome today for the first time on our Zoom meeting, and trust he will join us many Mondays to come.
Mr. Samaranaka.
And also his...
Mr. Samaranaka.
Mr. Samaranaka, also from the Colombian Club of Sri Lanka, has joined us today as well. So we give them a very warm welcome.
Thank you. May I just correct, it's really past District Governor Senaka Amarasinghe, who is the chairman of our international services. He's the other guest who is coming. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
Once again, you are very much welcome. I've only been to Colombo once, and that was to do a brief visit to a tea plantation. But I certainly recall it, and I would love to visit Sri Lanka again.
Yeah, you're most welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'd like to move to Clive, who has had an opportunity to review our other visitors. And perhaps, Clive, you could introduce our other visitors.
Yes, thank you, President David. If the other visitors, if you could just unmute yourself, and as you unmute yourself, I will call you just to briefly introduce yourselves, please.
Particularly the presidents of other Rotary clubs. I think we have Southgate and perhaps others with us.
We have David Abadan again from Nigeria. Welcome, David.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be your midst.
Good.
Yeah, nice meeting you guys again.
Good to see you again. Thank you. And Hill joining us again.
It's my pleasure.
Hello, everyone. I bring greetings from the Rotary Club of Gourock. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris Compton.
Good afternoon. Yeah, Chris Compton, Rotary Club of Ravensbourne, District 1120. I'm the environmental chair.
Thank you.
Greetings from sunny Bromley.
Thank you. Ken Abiodun.
Yeah, good afternoon. I bring you greetings from Rotary Club of Chingford. Thank you for having me again.
Thank you. Harry Belloc, we've already welcomed from Radlett. There's someone who's just got the title I Shack. I'm not too sure who that is.
I am from the President Rotary Club of Southgate, London.
Good to see you. Welcome.
Thank you, Nikki. Thank you.
And Suresh Bhawani.
Good afternoon. I'm Suresh Bhawani from the Rotary Club of Edgware and Stanmore. Thank you for having me.
Thanks. And I don't see anybody else who's unmuted themselves to introduce themselves.
Eve, yes, Eve. Eve.
Yes, just to say greetings again from the Rotary Club of Redbridge. Delightful to be here on a sunny Monday.
Thank you, Eve. Right, let me move on then. We have two other important events to cover before we get to our most important event. And I'd now like to call upon the chairman of our foundation committee, Rajiv, to introduce some very important people. Rajiv.
Oh, thank you, President David. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our three global scholars, and global scholars in the true sense of the word. Starting with Francesco, unfortunately he hasn't joined. He's at the Zoom meeting, but hasn't arrived in London as yet. But I can see he's with us today. Francesco has a master's degree in law from Italy, and was also vice president of the local Rotaract Club. Now he's studying law at King's College. We move on to Martha. Martha has a BA in International Studies from Texas, and has also studied in Spain. Martha is studying conflict studies at the London School of Economics. And last but not least, we have Charles. Charles arrived yesterday from Antwerp. He has a master's degree in law and was a member of the European Youth Parliament. Charles is studying law at King's College. Unfortunately, Charles could not make it at this meeting because he's been invited to a physical lecture today. However, we have the other two with us. So without further ado, over to Francesco. Francesco, all yours. You've got a couple of minutes to say hello to us.
Rajiv, could we move on to our second speaker and give Francesco a chance to check out his sound? I think he's perhaps needs just to review his sound connection.
That's fine. It's all over to you, Martha. If you can unmute yourself and say a few words. She was here, but I can't see her anymore. Clive, can you see her?
Right, Rajiv, we will try to come back to that at the end of the meeting. Right. If we may, and if I may ask Martha if she can hear me, and Francesco if you can hear me, just to check out your sound links. You can try them out without being online, and we'll try to speak to you later in the morning. I'd now like to introduce someone who needs no introduction, our immediate past president, Tim McAndrews, who is going to announce an adventure. At least it's an adventure for me. I've never done it before. and hopefully he will be able to encourage you to actually donate to a very, 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 very good cause. Tim.
President David, members and visitors to our club. Every year this club holds a golf day, and we normally raise a substantial sum of money from that golf day, normally certainly over £10,000. This year, because of the current situation, we are not able to hold that golf day, primarily because a lot of the money is raised at a dinner that we hold after the golf has been completed, and we're not able to hold that dinner, which includes auctions and raffles and all sorts of things. So instead, next Thursday week on the 8th of October at Berkhamsted Golf Course, there will be a golf day challenge, which will be designed to raise money for good causes. And there will be two good causes, and they are both children's charities. The first one, the first charity to benefit will be Lifeline for Kids, which is a charity for seriously disabled children and their families. All monies that go to this relatively small charity go to the kids and the families. There are no paid employees and no paid fundraisers. The second charity, which will benefit, will be Noah's Ark. Noah's Ark is a hospice for children who are unlikely to reach their 18th birthdays. So think about that. We have the benefit always at our golf day, or certainly in recent years at our golf day, of a generous donator member of our club who will always match the monies that we raise on our golf day 1-to-1, up to a limit of £10,000. So if we raise £10,000, that the donator will donate a further £10,000. So your money that you contribute towards one of these charities will be doubled. I'm going to ask you in a minute to contribute to sponsor one of those charities. And if you do so, the money will be paid into our Rotary Club of London charity account. If you are a UK taxpayer, that therefore will give the benefit of a further 25% in gift aid. So what that means in simple English is if you give £100, you are a UK taxpayer, that goes up to £125. And from our generous member who will double that, that goes to £250. So your £100 can become £250. Now the game will be played on the basis of a president's team, David, against a vice president's team, Ian. And in a moment, I'm going to do the draw for which players play on which team. We're going to make it a challenge because each of the players involved will be allowed to take only 3 golf clubs with them, plus a putter. And anyone who's played golf will know that that will be quite a challenge getting around the course. In addition to that, the president will be the caddy for his team, so he will carry the clubs over the 6-mile course, and the vice president will be the caddy for his team. So a couple of extra things to make it a bit of fun and interest. I'm about to do the draw for who of which players is on which team and which team is supporting which charity. Also, the team that wins will get the benefit of the donation coming from the Rotary Club of London Charitable Trust. So there is an incentive in the game. So I have 4 pieces of paper here for the 4 people who have indicated they would like to play golf. The first draw will be for the president's team. So David, your team will be Rajiv, and Rajiv will play with Hugh Kirk. So that will be the president's team. The vice president. Could you say that
again, Tim? We didn't hear it very well.
It's Rajiv and Hugh will be the president's team.
Thank you.
By default, the remaining 2 names will be the vice president's team, which is Louis Hui and myself. And in terms of the charities, I've got the two charities here. The first one will be the President's charity. The President's team will play for Lifeline for Kids, and the Vice President's team will play for the Noah's Ark charity. So that's everything set up. I will ask Nikki or David to send out the bank account details for the Rotary Club of London Charitable Trust. Please give generously. We're all saving a lot of money, Rotary money, over these months by not going to dinners and events. This is a golden opportunity to use your money and to get it matched by our generous member. Thank you very much, President David. That's all I've got to say.
Thank you very much indeed, Tim. I thought we might actually have had a vote amongst all the members as to who would be in which team. So those of you that would like to have reorganised those teams, perhaps next year. Thank you very much to you both. That's particularly Tim and Louis for the idea, and to everybody who is going to support it. I would remind people that in our lockdown charity collection, we were very successful in raising £14,000 in a relatively short period of time, essentially because we're each saving at least £50 on not attending a lunch on a Monday. And I would ask you to really consider about donating now to see if we cannot get to a figure like £5,000 over the next week or so. Now, I'd like to move on now to the to the meat of the function, the meat of our lunch, and to introduce Tim Waugh, our member, who's going to speak on NATO post-COVID. Now, I didn't really know this, but Tim has never been Timothy. Tim is Thomas Ian MacDonald, which in a military sense has been shortened to Tim for, it must seem like, his whole career. He's a former senior official of the NATO Consultation Command and Control Agency, based in Brussels. His NATO responsibilities ranged from being Chief of Staff of the agency to more recently taking on the role of Project Director for the NATO Satellite program and the NATO deployed communication projects, including the major projects for Afghanistan. Prior to his NATO career, he served in the British Army for 30 years, his last appointment being Commander, Communications and Signal Brigade, Commander of 1 British Corps in Germany, and then Director of the Staff at Supreme Headquarters, Allied Powers, Europe, known colloquially as SHAPE. So Tim has got many activities at the moment, besides contributing very significantly to our club. He is working with VMVO, the Global Network Advisors, who specialize in combining an extensive financial and corporate development expertise with in-depth political analysis to formulate a sustainable strategy for future needs. So if you need to know that sort of information, you know who to approach now. So thank you, Tim, for being with us. Can I hand over to you to give us your talk? Tim.
Thank you, President David. SHAPE stands for Superb Holidays at Public Expense. President David and fellow Rotarians, when I planned this talk, I expected COVID to be over. And fortunately, this has not happened. So I broadened my talk to consider other aspects. My talk is, I hope, a natural follow-on to a very interesting discussion last week in our London Rotary Zoom on the need for action to ensure peace. My point is that if we wish to maintain peace, we must take our defence and security seriously, particularly at this time when it's perhaps been forgotten in the national and public priorities. It is an essential part of our society, and any lessons which impact our security need to be considered during the COVID recovery period and in the future. Some of what I'm about to say is pessimistic and may concern you, but as one noted commentator once said, the generic man is violent. In some cases, he will even fight over the boundary hedge on his property. Even today, there are reports of fighting between Armenia and Azerbaijan in a border dispute. Let me start by talking about vulnerabilities and concerns. First, conventional defense. We have what I call our various domains, land, sea, and air. But recently we've added two more, cyber and space. They are the new domains. All have their own specific challenges, which I'll mention later. We then have a nuclear dimension. Again, I'll cover that. We then have space, and then we have terrorism and immigration, energy and energy distribution. I'll not deal with terrorism and immigration or energy security because these tend to be internal national security issues, but such threats do need to be discussed in international fora. I also do not have time in this presentation to give you the full impact of that. Now, in order to ensure our overall security and our wish for peace, it has to be addressed globally, and at the same time, we have to adhere to human rights and now recognize climate change. NATO is one of the major international forums in dealing with all these related security issues, which are a vital part of our Western society. So where does NATO fit in, and what is NATO? Let me give you a few quick facts. As with this diverse Zoom audience which we've got today, I'd like to ensure that we all have the same starting point. NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, was formed in 1948 after World War II to ensure peace in Europe. So it has basically achieved that aim over the last 70 years and therefore can be considered a success. It is a political and military alliance consisting of 30 democratic nations. Albania and Montenegro have recently joined. We do have some current concerns about the democratic principles in some Eastern European states and in Turkey. However, let's forget that for the moment. Do not forget that many of the nations, NATO nations, are not in the EU, for instance, Norway, Turkey, Canada, and the US. So the organization has different aspirations and opinions from a European perspective. I cannot stress strongly enough that it is a political alliance with a military capacity if needed. That is its strength, as all decisions are endorsed politically, are made by consensus and not by majority voting. All nations have political ambassadors and their staff at NATO headquarters in Brussels, where I am today. And there is also a military committee of senior officers from the member nations in Brussels working alongside their political representatives. The primary role of the alliance is a defense of the alliance nations. It is a defensive alliance and is not aggressive. You may well ask what about Bosnia, Iraq, and Afghanistan. Under the NATO Charter, these were out-of-area operations for conflict prevention or stabilization. They were not NATO approved and led military operational missions. Many do not also realize that NATO also has partner nations, 20 Euro-Atlantic nations, 7 Mediterranean nations, and 4 Gulf states. Many have political and military representatives, and they reside in Brussels alongside NATO headquarters. For instance, Ireland, Kazakhstan, Finland, Sweden, etc. So it is an ideal location for international discussions. One point to emphasize, and is important, is that NATO does not have its own forces and relies on the provision of forces from member nations for any activities or operations. UK forces are committed to NATO when required, but they are small. To give you an idea, the size of the British Army is currently 73,000. I would suggest Manchester United have more people at a Saturday match. The biggest force contribution to NATO normally comes from the US. NATO has 2 military headquarters, one in Belgium and the other in the US in Norfolk, Virginia, and 3 operational commands in the Netherlands, in Brunssum, in Italy in Naples, and the US. This Atlantic Command in the US was only stood up last week on the 17th of September, and that is because of an increase in Russian activity in the Atlantic, and more on that in a moment. And 1 Logistic Command in Germany. These operational commands are primarily concerned with our conventional defense which I mentioned earlier, especially involving land, sea, and air. NATO does have, however, some military assets under its immediate control, which are provided by nations who see benefit in pooling funding to provide a shared capability. These are not paid for by all NATO nations. They include a NATO early warning aircraft based in Germany. Those are the ones with circular discs on top, airborne radars. NATO transport aircraft based in Holland, and NATO unmanned aerial vehicles based in Sicily, and they're primarily for the surveillance of the Mediterranean. They are not small drones. They are very large unmanned aerial vehicles. Now, let me quickly mention budgets. In recent years, the budget of NATO has been a point of discussion. There are various budgets that sustain NATO's political, military, and operational infrastructure, such as headquarters, communication, ports, airfields, and its various programs. The costs are divided between the nations. Currently, US pays 23%, Germany, UK, France, about between 10 and 14%. But there is some confusion. The NATO budget recently in the news is the amount that each nation has agreed to pay to sustain its own military forces in order to be able to contribute when forces are required by NATO. Nations are expected to pay 2% of their GDP, their gross domestic product, as part of the long-standing agreement. Although in 2014 the nations agreed to meet this level of commitment, many nations still failed to meet this expenditure level. Germany is a good example. Although it was highlighted by President Trump recently, it has been a continuing theme for US presidents since it was raised by President Kennedy in the 60s. Of course, he didn't have a Twitter account. At present, although Europe has the wealth, I do not believe that there is a political will or the public support necessary to increase its overall funding for defense. And thus the US and the transatlantic dimension is vital if NATO is to survive and be effective. So that is my preamble. Now to the meat. During the current COVID crisis, the role of NATO has been to preserve the readiness of its forces, keeping them safe, plus supporting the nations in meeting the COVID-19 challenge. To this end, the main roles have been 350 flights to move personal and medical supplies worldwide, and that includes places like Georgia, Moldova, the Caucasus, etc. Providing training and personnel to assist in hospitals, emergency hospital building, border control, testing, and internal security. Developing an operational plan in the event of a second wave. Recently, the US provided a vast amount of PPE and ventilators to the NATO Supply Center for this purpose. Helping to overcome the weakness in supply channels, which rely on international suppliers, by reinforcing them by using military logistics systems. And finally, tackling disinformation and propaganda, which can undermine public confidence in the nation's response to the pandemic. Now, I'd like to dwell on this last point, but before I do, let me mention Russia. NATO's recent relationship with Russia has been difficult as they continue to threaten and destabilize the Baltic states. They have increased their military activity in the Atlantic, which I mentioned earlier. They have increased their cyber and hacking activities, and they flout international military agreements designed to assist confidence building. In respect of the virus, Russia has been particularly active with state-sponsored actors and others to undermine public confidence. One example is that Russian TV and Sputnik outlets made a number of false accusations, including a fake letter from the NATO Secretary General to the Latvian Prime Minister, that NATO would be pulling troops out of Latvia and that NATO exercises were spreading the virus in his country. There are many other examples which I can cover in question time if you're interested. As you know, recently we had another poisoning which also reinforces the lack of trust and any immediate chance of improved relations. China, although not in Europe, is also a problem. I must mention the rise of China, as there are concerns about its military and global aspirations. NATO does not consider China as an adversary, but needs to maintain an engagement. Currently, NATO nations do not believe China shares our common values of tolerance and diversity, particularly its use of artificial intelligence for surveillance and its treatment of certain elements of their population. Their intensive cyber threat is state-sponsored. Currently, China's disinformation is to reduce criticism of the Chinese response to the virus, and even went as far as blaming NATO nations for the spread of the outbreak. It became so serious in April that the French foreign minister had to summon the Chinese ambassador in respect of their comments on French actions to combat COVID. At one stage, a senior Chinese diplomat even suggested that the outbreak in Wuhan was brought to China by the US Army. NATO has its part to play in combating these falsifications and disinformation, as the public tend to believe the first story that they see in the media. The newest threat, which I mentioned earlier, and one we have to take seriously, is the attempts to destabilize our society by cyber attacks. Western nations are under threat, and NATO has established a very effective cyber defense capability in association with the industry as part of the overall defense for the NATO nations. There is a need for a coordinating body, and NATO takes on some of this role. Some examples during the COVID-19 period have been Zahid Hamid Architects in London, who had a major loss of data as the hacker made use of the fact that many of the staff were working from home. The University of California laboratory lost data related to their search for the COVID-19 vaccine. They had to pay $1.14 million in Bitcoin to retrieve the data. There are many more examples, and it has been estimated there's been a 600% increase in cyber activity during this period, mostly from Russia and China. The estimate is that 20,000 attacks are related to COVID misinformation. What effect does this have in the long term? For instance, in support for vaccinations, the necessary for COVID measures, etc., and the public view. As one commentator put it, we are seeing the weaponization of information to destabilize. So where are the military challenges to NATO now? The defense of the Baltic states against continual Russian harassment, particularly cyber. We have battalions in Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and a US force in Poland. They are small forces to show the nation and the nation's commitment and NATO international commitment. A British battalion is in Estonia. The biggest territorial danger in this area is what is called the Suwalki Gap, which is a 40-kilometer corridor from Belarus to the Russian enclave of Kaliningrad on the Baltic. If Russia wanted to join that part of Russia to the Russian vassal state of Belarus, it would be done in hours and would cut off the Baltic states from Poland and the rest of continental Europe. Would NATO go to war? I suspect not. But Putin's reputation in Russia would be enhanced as it was when he took over Crimea. All I say would we watch this space. Now let me mention nuclear, not a subject you hear about very often nowadays. A treaty called the International Nuclear Treaty, the INF Treaty, is an important part of nuclear deterrence. In 2019, the US, supported by the NATO nations, withdrew from this important treaty, which was intended to reduce the number of short-range nuclear weapons. In 2007, Putin announced he wanted to withdraw from the treaty. We now know the reason. It was that he wanted to develop new weapon systems. In 2018, the Russians actually deployed a new hypersonic missile, the SSC-8, capable of carrying nuclear warheads and taking out European targets, which destroys the concept of deterrence as envisaged under the treaty by reducing warning times. Thus, the US and NATO withdrew from the treaty. The US also decided to modernize its own nuclear arsenal, and it is reported that this requires around $2 trillion. Mr. Trump's mention of a new weapon in recent days suggests to me the US have developed at least a similar capability to that of the Russians. Thus, the nuclear threat is all still around. There are still 88 nuclear bombs in Europe, an estimated 13,000 nuclear weapons around the world. How safe is their continued security and storage? My point is that the world is no less dangerous. Certain commentators have also commented that hacking of nuclear systems, once considered impossible, is no longer true. So if I was alarmist, I would comment that theories of nuclear deterrence are predicated on rational actors who cherish a wish to live. Now, I'm not predicting, but I just want to leave you with a thought. No one believed we would have a pandemic. However, we urgently need new international treaties to bring back some semblance of world nuclear order. This thought is reinforced by the fact that the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, called START, between Russia and the US expires in February 2021. If not extended by the participants into 2026. Now China needs to be involved because they have developed a capability as well. We are also, therefore, now in a multinational world where 9 nations have nuclear weapons and up to 10 nations have the know-how. So this is a multinational problem. What about space? You'll be interested to know this, the US have this year established a space command and a space force. It shades of Star Wars and Luke Skywalker. This may sound fantastical, but the threat from space is considerable. On the 15th of July this year, a Russian satellite fired a projectile out into space, and this is not the first time. The US and China have similar capabilities. And with the Chinese launching 22 satellites this year alone, it makes space a possible future theatre of war. That is why it is now called a domain. This could seriously affect our lifestyle, as perhaps the loss of some GPS, communications, and other essential space-based services could have severe repercussions. An area of concern rather than an immediate threat, but we urgently need to establish multinational rules of the road in space. We also have the Middle East and Libya, tensions in the Eastern Mediterranean from Greece and Turkey, and the French have recently become involved. The Greece-Turkey territorial dispute and the problems of Cyprus has been going on for years, but now the question is who owns the continental shelf and the probable gas reserves. It also involves Egypt and Israel. We therefore have increased regional uncertainty apart from all the other issues in that area. Having just concentrated on a few of the real threats, what can NATO do? We are likely to see a changing world after COVID, and NATO has to adapt. I suggest we are in a world where prevention is the aim rather than intervention. But history suggests we must remain vigilant and strong enough to respond to emerging threats. NATO can increase the use of soft power, prevention rather than the use of military force, by training and increasing the local security capacity in nations and its partner nations. Today, this means contributing assistance with COVID-19 rules, which I mentioned before. Increased effort on providing training teams, education, etc., about our civil values and how we incorporate women's rights, sexual violence protection, human rights, and climate change into our defense-related society. All these, plus cyber assistance, are seen by NATO today as beneficial activities to help preserve peace. Only last month, there were meetings in NATO headquarters to discuss these particular issues. The latest initiative for the future is called NATO 2030, a more global approach. The emphasis being on prevention and taking note of global trends, like the rise of China and the effect it can have on our ability to respond to threats. This requires greater cooperation with partners outside the European area, such as Australia, New Zealand, Japan, and South Korea. In my view, it is particularly important as the US commitment to Europe could be influenced by their increasing concentration on events in the Pacific. To conclude, a couple of quick comments. Moving troops from Germany and the US commitment. This has been in the news. I personally do not see this as a real problem for now, but noting my previous comments on the Pacific, I can see why it causes concerns to some. Finally, will Brexit make a difference? No and yes. There'll be no less commitment to NATO from UK, but we will no longer have the modifying voice in European defence issues and have no access to the European Defence Funds, which is €8 billion, which have been vital for us in developing joint and collaborative projects. The NATO assessment today is the world is no less dangerous and there are always new threats. But the organisation is there to foster peace and security. Its rationale is based on shared values in a multinational environment and a desire to be seen as a peacemaker and a peace builder. As I mentioned earlier, it has helped keep the peace in Europe since World War II through the use of what I would call a velvet fist. And I would suggest that this investment in shared security is our long-term interest, particularly with so much uncertainty around. I leave you with that thought, but I have to stress it does require national commitment to defence spending and the maintenance of capable and credible defence forces to meet changing threats. That is a considerable challenge in the post-COVID and economically strangled environment. These are, of course, my personal views.
Thank you very much indeed, Tim. A lot of grounds for thought there, not all cheerful, as you implied at the beginning. I would like now to ask Clive to lead questions for perhaps 15 or 20 minutes, Clive. Okay. We have a bit of business to do. We have a bit of business to do after the meeting, after the questions, which I deferred from before Tim started speaking.
Yes.
And I'd also ask for people to ask questions, not make statements. The personal views of Tim are what we're here to hear. Please ask Tim for his views further, rather than make statements. Thank you. Over to you, Clive.
Thank you very much, President David. If you wish to ask a question of Tim, will you please unmute yourself? If you do that, your name will appear up on a list that I can see here, and then I know the order in which to call you. If you simply wave at me on the gallery, because of the way the Zoom sets up the galleries, they're not always the same from page to page, and I could easily miss you. I don't wish to do that. So I'm going to start with Clisman. Clisman Marathi, you have a question, and then it will be followed by Ryan Jones.
Thank you very much, Clive. Thank you so much, Tim, for your wonderful talk. I'm particularly interested in this field because this is the field that I work in myself with my consultancy. I worked with NATO and other players such as the EU, the Pentagon, the US Air Force in the past, but specifically in terms of outer space, that's an area which we focus on too. What ways do you think private industry can engage with organizations like NATO on, because this, can you hear me?
We can hear you, yes, but intermittently. We hear you intermittently.
Well, in summary, how can private organizations engage with NATO when it comes time to things like cyber and outer space defense?
Okay. Interestingly, because I got involved in this early on, and I was responsible for the provision of the cyber defense capability of NATO and the procurement of it. You have to look at what NATO is looking for. They put out various requests for bids from time to time on their, let's say, on their internet sites. One from the NATO Command and Control Agency is the one you should be looking at. And then you can get involved in those projects that they're looking for industrial involvement. I think that's the easiest way I can put it. There's no easy way in. You have to go and respond to requests for bids.
Thank you. Ridian.
Thanks, Tim. As ever, it's fascinating to hear your knowledge-based talk from the centre of NATO. Although you're no longer officially speaking on behalf of NATO, I understand that. I have two questions that I'd like you to address. One is on the Greece-Turkey situation. In the Times this morning, apparently the Americans have announced that they're going to remove their bases from Turkey and relocate them in Crete. Whether that's a threat or a plan, by a threat by Twitter or a real plan, I don't know, but it's in today's paper. And secondly, what's your view on the possibility of Britain removing its tanks from the battlefield and moving to alternative forms of defense as part of the current defense review? Thank you.
Thank you, Ridian. Two good questions. The relocation of the Turkish sites, I think, is speculation at this stage, personally. The commitment to Turkey has to remain if we're going to have, or NATO is going to have any role in the Middle East. You've got no other place to do it, and Crete is not the answer. There may be a reduction of some of the American presence because I know the Americans feel under threat in certain parts of Turkey at this particular moment, particularly in Diyarbakir, which is in the east. So I would wait a few weeks before we make a decision of whether it came, as you say, it came on Twitter, it came by other means. UK and tanks. This is an interesting debate. I had a debate with my friends the other day, ex-military, and they're all very much against it. They say we must retain our capability. Personally, I think in the defense review, you're going to see a move away to the more unconventional type of defense like cyber and things where we can actually use our capabilities to much greater effect. Whether we get rid of tanks, I think we'll go to light tanks so that we can actually put some form of mixed brigade, as we're doing in the Baltics, with a capability. But you'd reinforce it with American tanks or German tanks, which are actually in Europe.
Thank you. Ashak, your question, please.
I have a very interesting topic. I feel that NATO has maintained a lot of influence the whole of Europe and including Russia. If not for NATO, again, the whole of Europe will be in a very, very precarious position. So NATO has to balance very carefully, in my own opinion, between Turkey and the recent, we have Azerbaijan and so on. If they get involved in it, I'm sure they will listen because everybody gives a lot of attention to NATO. And I think they play a very important part. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, I agree that NATO has a part to play in the prevention of conflict in these areas, and that's what they're trying to do at the moment. They put training teams into Iraq and into Afghanistan and into other countries in order to help them prevent conflict, and it's a big challenge for them at the moment, all over the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Gerhard. Gerhard Connect.
Right. With regard to the ability of Russians, Chinese, and others to influence us, informing us or misrepresenting whatever, what are the NATO capabilities to do the same in Russia and other places? Are we just as good or are they much better?
It's a very difficult one because nobody is admitting that we have any let's say, capability for other things other than defense. If you look at the Americans and you look at ourselves and you look at statements that have been made in the last few months, it is clear to me that we have a capability, but nobody talks about it. I don't think we're into disinformation, but we certainly are into responding to cyber attacks and attacking those people who are attacking us, is my view. And that's talking to people who should be in the know.
Yeah, it seems that there is, in a worldwide ranking that has been done recently, US comes first, China second, UK third, and Russia fourth. Just so maybe that's the capability of attacking, even if nobody actually admits to attacking.
Yeah. Well, that's why it's considered a domain, and it's considered a domain because it's now taking on, let's say, attack and defensive activities.
Thank you.
Brian Coleman.
I sat on the Council of Europe for a number of years and twice visited Armenia. And of course, Armenia and Azerbaijan is in the news again this week. Armenia's been at war for the last 30 years, technically, as you will know, and felt very much neglected by the West. For example, minor matter, they'd never had a visit by a member of the British royal family, and yet the Duke of York was almost every other month in Azerbaijan. I actually got the Princess Royal to visit Armenia, but Armenia felt very neglected by the West and NATO, and that forced them into Russia's camp. Do you want to comment?
No, I don't. I tell you why, because it's extremely difficult to say which camp people want to get into. They get into the camp which is in their national interest. And Kazakhstan, for instance, got very carefully into NATO's camp because it believed it would have some advantages. I'm not sure it now looks on it in the same way, but we'll have to wait and see. It's a good point, Brian, and I agree with you. And I think all that's happened is that the ceasefires have been broken, and that's what makes it very dangerous in that area.
Paul Sennett.
Hello there. Amazing talk. I found your delivery was very, very well done. So thank you for that. I had a question about how NATO works. Does NATO ask nations to provide it resources to carry out something like a mission in Afghanistan, or do the nations ask NATO to do that in a coordinated way? So it's a sort of egg and chicken or chicken and egg question.
Tim, unmute, please. Tim, you've muted.
Afghanistan is a very good point, because Afghanistan was a coalition of the willing led by the US. And therefore, NATO produced a stabilization force, which was, and there were volunteers from within the NATO nations to provide the stabilization, initially in Kabul, and then to widen it to other parts of Afghanistan. So forces are generated, for instance, in Kosovo, when they did the prevention in Kosovo, they went out to the nations and said, who's going to come and join us? And they looked over let's say 5,000 or 6,000 initially, and expanded from there. So it depends upon the operation. It depends on what they want them to do. And it depends on the political will of the governments to join in.
Thank you. Justin.
Thank you.
There's talk of the Americans slightly changing their orientation and swiveling around to meet what they perceive as a Chinese threat. Is this something that you feel that the Russians are taking advantage of in the Baltic states?
I don't see that at the moment. But there's no doubt about it. If you go to the Pacific coast, and I went to San Diego, and the United States Navy and the Marine Corps down there, they're not interested in Europe. They're only interested in the Pacific Rim. If you're in Europe and talking to Americans here, they will say we're still committed here because it's in our interest to make sure that the back door is not open. They're concerned about Russia as much as we are. And so they don't want to leave the back door. And they see the Baltic states as one of the areas where Russia could, let's say, increase its involvement and cause problems.
President David, 15 minutes as you requested.
Thank you very much indeed, Clive, and thank you very much indeed, Tim, for answering those questions. I'd now like to call upon our news publisher to give you a vote of thanks. Doug Wills.
Hi, Tim, that was amazing. An incredible tour de force of everything. At the beginning, you said you wouldn't be touching upon terror, security, energy. I think we would love to hear any of those, but we would have loved to hear you carry on for the rest of the day. It really was superb. For my part, the one line which worried me and rather supported the stuff that I do as with the Evening Standard and the Independent, is when you said the public tend to believe the first story they read in the media. Well, I hope they read our papers first, because it's one of the biggest problems about, as you know, as you described. I think you said there are 20,000 attacks on for the COVID misinformation and the weaponizing of fake news. Well, we know who claims that, and not always with truth. But you were marvelous and were able, it was said earlier, your presentation, but it's absolutely superb, because you were able to distill an enormously complex historic story with some things that we could relate to. And in fact, another frightening point, I think, was you said our armed forces were sort of similar in size to a Man United game. Well, I hope it's not the same fans wear a uniform. But it was absolutely brilliant. And the optimistic note in there, I think you tried to come through with something. And the prevention rather than intervention and the soft power of NATO is something that we all applaud, support, and pray that will win through in this silent battle of the COVID-19. So thank you personally for educating me, and thank you on behalf of the club for entertaining us and informing us in equal measure. So thank you. And if I could ask the club to demonstrate in the normal way.
Thank you, Doug.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. And Tim, it now rests on me to present you with a certificate from the club, which will be sent on to you digitally in the near future. Maybe if we meet again, I'll be able to give it to you in your hand. Thank you so much again.
Thank you, David.
I'd now like to return to our club agenda by starting with a toast to our Queen as she approaches her centenary. Stability indeed. NATO helped and the Queen has been there throughout the NATO experience. Can I give you a toast to the Queen? Thank you. Those of that have a glass. I'd now like to revert, if I can, and check whether through Rajiv, Francesco is now online and able to say something to us. I did notice briefly that he appeared to have sound, but now he's gone rather blank. Ah.
Here we are. Can you hear me? Everybody can hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Francesco.
We can hear you, Francesco.
Oh, finally. I'm sorry for before. It seems that I had some problems. First of all, thank you for the kind invitation. And also, I enjoyed the presentation. It was really exciting from my side. And nothing. I want to just add a little bit more about what already Rashid have anticipated to you about who I am. And nothing. I'm a law student at King's College London. I'm coming from Italy, but also I have roots in South America since my mother is from Venezuela. So actually I am a son of two worlds, South America and Europe. And I'm really excited to start this new adventure in England, which was a global Britain. So I'm really excited to study international studies and the connection between Europe and Latin America to follow also my family roots. Thank you.
Thank you, Francesco.
Thank you very much, Francesco. Rajiv, is our other member online or not? Our other scholar, sorry. Rajiv,
yes,
you're muted, thanks.
She had to go to a lecture at 1:45, so unfortunately we missed her. But I'll organize another date when all three are together.
Thank you.
But what I'd like to do is thank Francesco, and on behalf of the Rotary Club of London, we wish you a successful year, and more importantly, you are now in our Rotary family and in our Rotary care. So anytime you want us, we are on a WhatsApp group. Sabrina and myself are here to help you whenever you want any help. And could we show our appreciation to Francesco at least, in true Rotary tradition.
Thank you very much, Rashid. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Mostly muted clapping, but I think everybody understands the sentiment. Now, the officers' reports, I've not been notified of any, but our almoner would like it reported that John Buchan, who we said was home.
John Buchanan.
It's easily done, but I'm not quite sure how I did it then. John Buchanan is back in hospital. He sends his apologies for not being with us today through Mary, but Mary assures us that he's being very well looked after and should be able to recuperate far better in hospital than he would be at home. I have no other ominous announcements. If there are any, I'd be grateful if people would let me know or just announce them. Are there any other illnesses or to report? Thank you. Are there any other, do any council chairs wish to report anything? Thank you. We have birthdays. Bob Graham, who I don't think I've seen on screen. Jackie Brown, 1st of October. Happy birthday of the 1st of October, Jackie. And Duchess Williams Alonga and David Formosa. Those are the birthdays coming up in the next week, and I'd like to wish you all a very, very happy birthday and many, many, many more of them. And in due course, in due course, I hope we'll be able to sing happy birthday to you. But it may well, if I had a voice, I might try, but and perhaps we should have a volunteer to lead us in future. We would do it if we were physically together. Anyway, it's good to see those of you that are on the screen, and you know, all the very best for your birthdays upcoming.
Thank you.
Visits to other clubs, I've not been notified in particular. I expect Redbridge may have been visited in the last week. If there are any particular reports.
Even I have visited Redbridge last week.
I'm particularly interested in those of members that have visited clubs overseas through Zoom. Do we have any people who've been able to do that in the last week?
Yes, I went to the South Africa.
Oh, great. Thanks, Julian. I mean, it's something we can do, and we should do if we can. We have several invitations, particularly from India, South Africa, and other places. And you know, please take up the opportunities if you can. They're always, at least those I've attended, have always been interesting topics, well worth listening to. I then now move on to, I think, the last business of the day, which is our final toast. I'll just check my notes. Oh, no. I have to announce the next meeting, which I have forgotten once before. Our next meeting, our next Monday, we are very, very fortunate to have Chris Steele of Orbis speaking to us. It's almost connected with Tim's talk, and also not unrelated to the talk we had from Helen Fry on MI9. Christopher it was with the Secret Intelligence Service from 1987 until he retired in 2009. He ran the Russia desk at MI6 until 2009. He then started his own security organization called Orbis. He has asked that, and we have confirmed, we will not be recording next week's talk. Therefore, the only way you will hear what Chris Steele has got to tell us is by being online and listening to him talk. It will be interesting, and you can ask your questions, and perhaps your questions will make it also revealing. So thank you. Till next week, the final toast to Rotary and peace the world over. Please raise your glasses. To
Rotary and peace.
And peace the world over. Thank you.
Rotary and
Thank
peace
you.
worldwide.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We've actually finished a bit ahead of time, Clive. If anybody wants to stay on to talk, I don't know. Tim, are you going to be around for a few minutes, or take other questions, or have a chat?
Yes, I'm very happy to stay on, and I've got a request from somebody to Kilfan, who wanted to know how to get in touch with me. If he wants to do that, do it at wartim@hotmail.com. It's easy.
This is our only opportunity really to do what we would do if we met at the Chesterfield and sort of pop around the tables and say hello to people. So please, do say anything on your mind and enjoy the next 15 minutes, Clive.
Yes, I'll leave it on for a few minutes.
Would you be around?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
May I say a few words? I'm Rajiv Walpita from Colombo, Sri Lanka.
Yes, we'd be.
Of course, yes, please do.
Yes. Just, of course, my apologies for joining late, but my thanks to Hugh Kirk for inviting us. There are a few of us joining you today.
Yes.
And we hope to be in touch again. And we will also keep you informed of our Zoom meetings so that a few of you may join us.
Hello, Rajiv. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Hi, Hugh. Sorry you got a little late, but joined you.
We'll certainly try to join one of your meetings as well.
Yes.
Good to see you and hear you.
Yeah, good to see you. And we're pleased your president could also join us today. That was great.
Right.
Look forward to seeing
So
you.
Yeah, we hope to get on to
Thank you.
Colombo again before too long.
Yes.
We also have joining in from the Rotary Club of Colombo, District Governor nominee Ubudu de Souza. She logged in some time ago, but the meeting was on, so yes.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for that.
You're all very welcome.
Yeah, hello everyone. Hi.
Hello, Clive. Can I say something? Clive?
Hello.
Hello, Clive. Can I say something?
Yes, Margaret. Yeah.
Thank you very much for having me. Can I please take this opportunity to invite anybody who wants to visit our club on the 7th of October, 6:15 to 6:30 p.m. The First Lady of Rotary, Mrs. Maloney, will be having a talk with us. Please join us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And can I say something as well, please?
Yes, do, Asha.
Yes. President David Johnson, I'm Ishaq Tahir from President of the Rotary Club of Southgate. We would like to invite as many of you. Unfortunately, our timing of meeting is at the same time, Mondays at 12:30. I found it very, very difficult to fit in today. So, because some are not well and some are on holiday, and with the coronavirus, I enjoyed the meeting very much. And I also appreciate that there are other members from Colombo, and I'm also from Sri Lanka, Colombo.
I see. Nice to know that.
Yes, so thank you very much for this, and it was very informative. And anybody who likes to join us as well, please do not hesitate to contact our Secretary Norman, who will, or even Chris Rash, or myself. Thank you once again, and I enjoyed every part of your meeting. And excellent. I like to say President David Johnson and Tim, all of you who have done this, and Nikki, who was communicating with me for so long, some others to get me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ishaq. And we know we clash. That's why we very rarely have the opportunity of seeing each other. So thank you for being with us today.
President David, could you hear me?
Yes, Sinake, yeah.
Yes, just like to thank you for the meeting. I was a district governor in the year 2016-17, and it will be a pleasure if we could, on behalf of my club, which is Rotary Club of Colombo, extend an invitation to your club to have a sister club agreement with our club, which is the oldest club in Sri Lanka with a history of 90 years. Could you kindly consider that request?
Sanaka, yes, of course we can consider that. It is sometimes difficult because we love to visit with any association, and visiting at the moment, of course, is very difficult to plan or organise. But if you could, you please write to us to the secretary with your suggestion, and then we can take it through our council and respond formally.
Certainly, we'd certainly follow up on that. Thank you, and it was an enjoyable meeting, and wish you all the best for the rest of your year. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.